It is time to reflect on the prequel trilogy. Although I was happy with my original reviews of these films, I do feel like they could have gone on a little longer. And now that I've seen the original trilogy and how amazing they are, do the prequels still hold up? Keep in mind, these are not re-reviews. These are just simply reflections. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy, because this one is going to be a long one. Every saga has a beginning. That is the tagline for Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. We see the Republic laws are dying and that there has to be balance within the Force after 1,000 years or so of peace and harmony. There is a growing threat in the galaxy in the form of compromising the taxation of trade routes in the galaxy, led by the Trade Federation's leader, Viceroy Newt Gunray. He and the Federation does this by invading the peaceful planet of Naboo, while the Republic, Senate, and the Jedi Council are debating what to do at the same time, especially when the Trade Federation is about to invade Naboo. Darth Sidious joined forces with the Trade Federation to overpower the Senate. A galaxy that was once in balance is now taken over by the dark side of the Force. We are in a different society. Of high class, the Senate, the Jedi Council, and the Republic, and lower class, Tatooine and the Gungan City. Just like in the 1800s or early 1900s. Kind of like Downton Abbey, but with a mythical and war feel. The movie is actually set 32 years before the original trilogy. So the outline of the story isn't bad, at least the setting is interesting. It shows that we are in a time where everyone's views mattered, where after thousands of years of peace, there are now conflicts and issues going on, and we need keepers of the peace to put the dark side in its place. That's where the Jedi Council and the Senate come in. I honestly don't mind the political side of Star Wars. I never said that I liked it. I just said that I never minded it. There's a difference. There is an important scene where Darth Maul and Sidious say, actually Darth Maul says this, that they will finally reveal themselves to the Jedi. Apparently, before the events of Phantom Menace, the Sith have never actually revealed themselves before, and now the Sith want to actually show themselves after all these years. Our opening scene introduces Obi-Wan Kenobi, who we knew from the original trilogy, and Qui-Gon Jinn. They are sent by the Republic to negotiate with the Trade Federation over the trade dispute, only to learn that Newt doesn't want a negotiation, but rather his demands being met ASAP, which is to force Queen Padme Amidala to sign a treaty making their droid invasion legal, with Sidious wanting it so too. Unfortunately, it's not the best way to open the film, mainly because of the fact that it isn't as iconic as the original trilogy, and plus it's also slow. At least when you compare it to the rest of the films in the saga. Qui-Gon Jinn is a good concept. He's the most knowledgeable Jedi in this film outside of Yoda, so it's understandable that his dialogue consists of him being patient and wise. After all, Qui-Gon was trained by Yoda. But like I said, he doesn't have much to do. It wouldn't be so bad if the direction was more focused on what he can do as opposed to him just saying exposition and being in a fight every once in a while. But to be honest, Liam Neeson does a good job trying. Jake Lloyd as young Anakin Skywalker. Honestly guys, he's fine. It's not so much his acting is bad, and I wish people can just stop making jokes about his acting, because honestly, it wouldn't matter who played Anakin to me. The big problem with Anakin in this film is, like I always say, the directing and the writing. You already know the story with Anakin Skywalker and how the Jedi actually meet Anakin, so I'm just gonna get straight to the point. The writing could have been improved on him so much. Not just for Jake Lloyd, but in general. I would have had it where he doesn't say some corny stuff like, "This is tense!" and, "Are you an angel?" These lines make him more like someone else instead of a destined Jedi to be turned to the dark side. And the directing was just not focused either. It's true that George Lucas stepped into the director's chair after the original film from 1977, but still, I think you should focus on what's going on around you, how to deliver your words on screen, how to direct your actors to be that character, and then worry about how it's going to look later, especially if it's a sci-fi film. That's what Stanley Kubrick did. He paid attention to detail when it came to the script, themes, and character arc, and then he worried about what the world and setting was going to look like later. I acknowledge that George is a visual storyteller, kind of like me a bit, and that's neat, but if I was him, I would direct his actors to be more natural instead of monotone and average. Moving on. I hummed best as Jar Jar Binks. Oh my god. Look, I hummed best. You're a good person, and I hope you are getting good work nowadays, but You were just given bad material and bad direction. I know Jar Jar is clumsy and wants to belong, and I know he means well, but you wouldn't know that unless you watched the behind the scenes documentaries of the movie. Any Star Wars fan can tell you that they see him as annoying, klutzy, aggravating, and one of the worst characters imaginable. And while I don't like him, I have dealt with worse characters. P.S. You decided to put poop jokes in a Star Wars movie, not once but twice. Not cool. And also, I don't get why everyone thinks that Jar Jar is some kind of sign of a zombie apocalypse. I know he's lame, but not so bad to where everyone wants to kill him. I forgot to mention in my original review that there's another character named Watto, who owns the parts shop that Anakin works for. He is actually a neat character. He's a Toydarian. A Jedi's force power won't fool him. Only money and gambling can trick him. But sadly, he is not utilized fully, even though his design is interesting. I do like him, though. He does come back in episode 2, but briefly. Watto, I hope you make more appearances in later films and or TV shows. Deal? Deal! There are other characters who aren't utilized fully, like Sebulba, who raises Anakin in the pod race. I don't know what species he is. And the least utilized character is, like I said, Darth Maul. He contributes almost nothing outside of being Sidious's apprentice. His design is interesting and different, but other than that, he contributes very little. He only has 5 lines in the entire movie. I'm sorry, but 5 lines will not help me understand who this character is. And that's another thing. Our first 15 minutes are slow with little build-up. At least with the original trilogy, they started in the right place. We knew that we were in a war. We followed the characters we loved so much, and each opening sequence was iconic. But here, it takes a while for the movie to get going, except with small amounts of action in between. I mean, I feel like it's trying to get somewhere, but the more I watch this, and I have seen it plenty of times, and will most likely watch it many more times after this, it just feels like it's on the right track of establishing settings, story arc, concern, and character development, and then, for whatever reason, it just slows down. It doesn't feel like it knows why it's going the way it's going. I'm sorry, but the character arc is very limited if you aren't even gonna give us a reason why we should be concerned about who these characters are. Especially Qui-Gon, who does little but talk exposition, and when he dies, it's like you just wish he did more stuff. See the pattern here? The action scenes are cool. Like I said, the action and battles are the best part. The droid battles, the duel between Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Darth Maul, the Battle of Naboo sequences, and the pod race are all excellent. So even if you don't like the film, you can admit the action scenes are really good. It still feels like Star Wars to me. I'll get back to that in a minute. But political talk, let's talk about this. But political talk might bore you guys, and yes, I was a little bored by it too the first time I saw it. And even here, as I'm watching this film again, I can't explain all of it. Here's what I can conjure up. Basically, the rulers of the Republic are dying, how Amidala's people are suffering, and that she must take action, and that Palpatine says that the bureaucrats are now in charge of the corruption, which the bureaucrats are also working with the Trade Federation, and Palpatine asks Amidala to vote for a new chancellor instead of Valorium, that the Trade Federation wants the Senate to take their side instead of the Republic and the Queen, but the Republic is trying to create its own laws, that the Sith are trying to take over against the Jedi, that on Tatooine, even though there are anti-slavery laws, the Republic has no value on Tatooine. But the more I watched it, the more I can understand it. Well, most of it anyway. As for the midichlorians, I talked a great deal about this. My defense still stands though, but having seen the original trilogy, I acknowledge now why people hate this aspect of the Star Wars mythos. It's clear to me now why people, including Star Wars fans, hate this. It ruins what the Force means, as an energy field that binds and unites everything. A force that can be used for good or evil. I'll explain more about that in the next video, but still, it just adds a layer of complexity to something that should be very simple. But remember, the midichlorians are not the Force, but rather they are allies with the Force. We still see the Jedis and Sith using the Force and talking about it, so they still have that. They are not taking over the Force's position. In fact, they never once said that the midichlorians are the Force. They never said that the Force is in your DNA. There is talk in this film about how Anakin might have been, quote, conceived by the midichlorians. or rather born within the Force. Anyway, there are some interesting moments like where R2-D2 meets C-3PO for the first time. It's a cute little moment as we see exactly how the two lovable droids from the original trilogy met. As for the argument that the visuals are in the foreground more than the story, here's the thing. When the movie came out in 1999, George Lucas could finally put his vision to life. He could do things that he could never do before with the original trilogy. He could do all these different things with the creatures, droids, battles, backgrounds, and so forth. He could show bigger space battles, he could show pods zooming about with interesting camera angles, he can show you lifelike creatures interacting with human characters, he can create new worlds, and so forth. As much as I respect that, here's the thing. There's a reason why practical effects are much more interesting than CG effects. And that's because with practical effects, there's actually something there. There's something acting in front of a camera. Whether it's interesting characters and creatures, or ships and battle stations in space. And how they created the effects are a mystery, yet interesting. But with CG, you're creating a virtual environment that couldn't exist. Although there were some practical effects in this film with the ship models and other things, there is still an overabundance of CG here. As much as I don't care whether a sci-fi movie has practical or CG effects, I do respect things performing in front of a camera more as opposed to creating a virtual environment. I do love the visuals though. To wrap things up, and I could go on forever about this movie, The Phantom Menace is flawed and the weakest of them all, but I would rate the film overall a 3 out of 5. Mainly because this is a quote-unquote bad film I could watch over and over again and actually enjoy it in not a guilty pleasure way, but as a way of appreciating that at least a lot of care went into this film. From the designs to the artwork, the visuals, the characters, to even the story. It's still Star Wars, and it's still good. It's not like no one had any heart when they were making this film. I just hope I'm not the only one who likes this film, and maybe one day people will look at this film and realize, hey, you know, there were worse films than this. In Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, we learn that it's the actual end of a republic, that it is the end of democracy, and it's the beginning of a new age. Mainly because, like I said, there is a separatist movement where many members of the Galactic Senate from all walks of the galaxy want to leave the republic, partly because they know it's corrupt and off balance. The political issues I mentioned before is easier to understand, but still, you can get lost in it sometimes. A major plot point is that the Trade Federation from Episode 1 returns, but they are working with the Separatists, and Newt Gunray led the assassination attempt of Padme, not Jango Fett, though Jango was a prime suspect in the attempt. All of which is under the command of Count Dooku, a political idealist who was once a Jedi trained by Yoda, who turned to the dark side. Like I said before, he is leading the Separatists against the Republic by creating a droid army to throw the Republic off. One thing I forgot to mention in my review was that there's talk of not trusting politicians because they trust only other senators and members of the Republic, or I guess something like that. The storyline is fair though. It shows Anakin Skywalker committing himself to the Jedi Order, but simultaneously he has a blind love for Padme, who he met in The Phantom Menace. But love is forbidden by the Jedi Order. In this film, you start to see signs of his dark side, or at least signs of what he will become. Anakin is torn between his duties as a Jedi and his personal feelings with Padme, whom he starts to fall in love with. He is arrogant and flies into danger without thinking about it, or in this case, feeling it. Simultaneously, he is learning to control himself, but he is also trying to be the best Jedi in the world. Even go as far as saving people from dying. The scene where Shmi, Anakin's mom, dies is a very powerful moment because we see the beginning of what leads him to the dark side. Remember how in The Phantom Menace Yoda says,
"Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering."
Remember that? Well, it takes full effect here. But what ruins it is the moment when Padme learns that out of grief and rage, he killed the Tusken Raiders that kidnapped Shmi, and she simply says, "To be angry is to be human." Which is strange considering how when you're a Jedi, you're called into a higher duty, like you're important. Especially for a Jedi who can feel so many things at once. It just seems strange to me. Even though he means well and wants to be a great Jedi, he feels misunderstood. When we first met Darth Vader, soon to be Anakin Skywalker in 1977 with Star Wars, he was ruthless, didn't give a crap about anyone else. All he wanted was to conquer the galaxy. But by Return of the Jedi, we learned he is also a tragedy. It all added up. In episode 2, to his credit, we weren't exactly why he got into that position in the first place. The death of his mother, his blind love for Padme, his relationship with Palpatine, and his arrogant nature. It all adds up in terms of character, but you wouldn't know that based on the writing. Anakin isn't believable. He just says he's angry and that he wasn't powerful enough to save his mom. Like I said, the dialogue can get a bit whiny and corny. The Sandwine, for example. Other than that, the character arc is done decently for me. We do get some more development on Padme Amidala, who was once Queen of Naboo and is now a senator, Obi-Wan and Palpatine, aka Lord Sidious. It does establish some things that you guys wanted to see from the original trilogy, like how the Clone Wars came to be. We hear how the clones were educated directly at birth, with combat education and a wide variety in training programs, as well as the fact that they can learn all of this stuff in half the time an adult clone can normally learn. Like the Phantom Menace, there are characters that should have been explored more, like Dexter Jester, who runs the diner, the assassin, who, does she even have a name? Zam Wazell? Queen Jamalia, who is now Queen of Naboo, who only has one scene. Captain Typho, who also protected Padme in the opening scene. And Wamasu, Prime Minister of Kamino. However, we do see important characters like Owen Lars and Beru, who would later become Luke's uncle and aunt. And Craig Lars, who is just only in this one film. There are also some good highlights here, like the speeder chase on Coruscant with Sam, Anakin, and Obi-Wan, the confrontation with Obi-Wan and Jango Fett, the Coliseum battle on Geonosis, where we actually see more Jedis, which is awesome. The Battle of Geonosis sequences are a blast, and the duel with Count Dooku, Anakin, Obi-Wan, plus the duel with Dooku and Yoda, which, like I said, was awesome. There might be some people that don't like this side of Yoda, because they always say that they think that Yoda should be just this wise old master, but having him swing around with a lightsaber is a mixed bag for some people. But no matter what you say, it's not like this movie is a total bore. There's an interesting scene where Dooku tells Obi-Wan that Dooku was an apprentice of Qui-Gon, and he knew that Qui-Gon told him about how there is a corruption of a Senate. A viceroy of a trade federation was betrayed by Sidious and asked Dooku for help, and Dooku wanted Obi-Wan to join him in defeating him, even though Dooku is a Sith Lord too, named Lord Tyrannus. And in Revenge of the Sith, he wanted to reveal Palpatine, but Anakin kills him before he could. The film is telling 2/3 of the original side story, with how the Clone Wars came to be. The film is 2.5 hours, and in that time you have to engage the audience while simultaneously telling a decent story with interesting characters. And this film, I hate to admit, is just too long. There are moments that drag and takes us out of the narrative. I'll be honest with you, the story is well constructed and the character development is pretty decent, but it unfortunately at times feels corny or not legitimate. I can see that the themes and outline of the story is still good and that I can see what it's trying to do. However, it feels at times slow and unconvincing, and at other times well thought out and very interesting. Weird, isn't it? Overall, I could go on about this film, but the film is just fine. Nothing spectacular, but it still is a Star Wars film, and it still has that spirit of care and dedication that these films have. In Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, there is an epic war in the galaxy with two parties, the Galactic Republic and the Confederacy of Independent Systems, which is led by Count Dooku, which that would explain why our opening shot is a big space battle. In this film, we see not only Anakin's turn from the Jedi Order to the dark side, but also the psychological effects of how someone who fought for peace and ending the war gets manipulated into something that single-handedly destroyed the galaxy. And it is shown very honestly and well executed. The emotions are raw, yet still so engaging. In Attack of the Clones, we found out how the Clone War got started. In Revenge of the Sith, it starts midway to toward the end of the war and how much is affected the Republic and the Jedi Council. Also, I don't know if you knew this, but after Darth Maul was defeated, Palpatine, aka Sidious, used Anakin as a pawn to be his apprentice. I never thought of it like that. While I described the character arc of Anakin's transformation in the film well in my original review, I realized that when Anakin's transformation was very smooth and clean, it can still need work. Maybe one or two rewrites of the dialogue could have made it perfect. Not only do we see Anakin's shocking transformation, but we also see how much of an effect it has on everyone he knows. From Padme, Obi-Wan, to even Yoda. It's executed, again, very well. But political talk is understandable because it doesn't bombard you with some new development every 10 minutes. It instead focused on character development and the beginning of the formation of a galactic empire. Although there is mention of the midichlorians, it's not saying that it is the Force. I knew that I was right! Admit it, I was right, wasn't I? In both episodes 2 and 3, Hayden Christensen is, well, decent as Anakin, who in episode 2 can get whiny and awkward at times. I think Hayden is not a bad choice to play older Anakin, but I wish his direction was improved. But in episode 3, he is more mature and very convincing as a character. Plus, his acting has improved a bit in episode 3. He's way better, a lot more believable if you ask me. Also in episodes 2 and 3, we have Christopher Lee as Count Dooku, who was amazing. Honestly, seeing him go from Hammer's Dracula to his Sith Lord was a great highlight. And his dialogue is very prophetic yet engaging. And both his fights in both 2 and 3 are well done. The only downside is that in Attack of the Clones, his duel with Yoda was a bit too short. I would have liked to see it go on for a little bit longer. In all 3 films, we might as well discuss that, we have Ian McGregor as Obi-Wan. He was pretty good. I think if you're going to replace Alec Guinness, it would be Ian McGregor. He is the one actor in the series who is natural and can be funny at times. Except in episode 1 where he kinda just stands around sometimes and does very little. The head of a Jedi Council, Mace Windu, played by Samuel L. Jackson, is an interesting yet wise character. And when you have Jules Winfield from Pulp Fiction as a Jedi with a purple lightsaber, that is just awesome. Yoda is still awesome to see. Still that wise Jedi Master we all know. Very knowledgeable. And guess what? Ian McDiarmid is great as Palpatine and Darth Sidious. He's wise but dangerous. Cunning but not obvious. Diabolical yet relatively content. He is a very threatening presence, and yet, at the same time, he is just a very three-dimensional character that has so many interesting layers and dialogue. Especially when he is revealed to be Darth Sidious, he becomes not just a senator with unbelievable power, but also one who's very, very real in what he wants to accomplish. By the way, a little trivia. Ian McDiarmid played the Emperor in Return of the Jedi, and that was all the way back in 1983. When we see Anakin turn to the dark side, it almost becomes a tragedy when you realize that his character is a tragic figure straight out of a Shakespearean drama. From a young boy on Tatooine with big dreams of being a Jedi to Darth Vader is just very sad to see. I heard one of my friends ask me if Qui-Gon Jinn trained Anakin, then he wouldn't become Darth Vader. I mean, Qui-Gon was trained by Yoda after all, so it would have made sense. But as far as I am concerned, if Anakin had never become friends with Palpatine, then the original trilogy would have never happened. It wouldn't have mattered if Qui-Gon or Obi-Wan trained him. It's Anakin and his relationship with Palpatine that should have been avoided. Another character who appears in all 3 films is Padme Amidala, played by Natalie Portman. She does her job. In the first film, she wanted to save her people of Naboo as queen. By episode 2, she's a senator now, and she's the one that single-handedly damages Anakin by being a part of his life. And by episode 3, she takes a back seat to Anakin's destructive turn from Jedi to Sith Lord. With all 3 films, the action scenes are faster, intense, and extremely entertaining. With the lightsaber scenes, they are faster and more stylized. Some people may find it a little bit bothersome that the lightsaber fights in the original trilogy were just simple clash this and clash that. And while that never really bothers me, in fact it's still pretty amazing considering at the time, now with the prequels, they're faster, almost like martial arts and samurai fighting. In fact, the lightsaber fights were inspired by the swashbuckling films of the 30s and 40s and samurai sword fighting. And plus, when you have Oscar winner John Williams doing the score, it's just a match made in heaven. These are not just amazing tracks, Each movie has its own theme, which is done very well. In episode 1, we have Duel of the Fates. In episode 2, we have a love ballad, Across the Stars. And in episode 3, we have Battle of the Heroes. All three are unique, interesting, and memorable. There are many different themes in the prequels. I already mentioned that in episode 1, there's the high class and the lower class, but there are way more themes here that I should point out. I'll give you a few examples. There are Zen meditations, which are a Jedi practice, much like in martial arts. Anakin Skywalker is the so-called Chosen One, the one who will bring balance to the Force. This draws similarities to the Christian narrative structure, but Anakin ultimately falls to the dark side and thus prevents him from fulfilling his destiny. In episode 2, the themes of power, love, jealousy, and loss are very well done. It also explores the feeling of being too emotionally involved with someone you care about and how it can damage one's ability to live their lives. In Anakin's case, Padme and his mother who dies at the hands of Tusken Raiders. In episode 3, the psychological effects of the characters reminds us of, like I already said, a Shakespeare tragedy. It shows how vulnerable someone can be in order to get what they desire. It is clear that Anakin can be vulnerable at times, and his arrogant nature, his blind love for Padme, and his devotion to Sidious all resulted in the death of the Republic and the rise of the Galactic Empire. And maybe Jar Jar's decision to give Palpatine emergency powers. The planet Mustafar could almost be an allegory for hell. The iconic scene where Padme confronts Anakin only to be betrayed, and the duel with Obi-Wan and Anakin could almost, in my eyes, be a way of confronting the evil inside Anakin, only to fail in the process and having to say goodbye to the Anakin they once knew. In fact, the moment when Anakin saves Sidious's wife before being killed by Mace Windu, that could be a metaphor for making a deal with the devil. All of the themes in not only Revenge of the Sith, but the rest of the prequels are interesting and essential in terms of storytelling and character development. It works. Now before I end this video, there's something I need to address. Something very important when it comes to the prequels. I know that there have been other people on YouTube like Sam's Views and I Hate Everything, for example, who have given their own in-depth analysis on the prequels. Their issues usually revolve around the fact that they are too long, they're boring, they have stilted acting, they have too much CG, they ruin characters from the original trilogy, they're pointless, and so forth. And while they are all reasonable criticisms, here's the thing, they are missing the big picture. I can't deny that they have big flaws in them, but they have very strong points and they have very interesting views. Overall, the prequels have strengths and weaknesses, but they aren't bad. I am being 100% honest with you all. The Phantom Menace is a decent film, but it's not amazing or anything. I never said it was. It's just mistreated in the eyes of fans. Attack of the Clones is better than Phantom Menace, but is flawed in the writing department. And in Revenge of the Sith, everything fell into place beautifully. So I would never say that the prequels are outright bad. Each have their highlights and important story elements, but they also have their weaknesses and flaws just like any other film. The truth is that these films are not bad. A lot of care went into this trilogy, from the narrative, sets, visuals, costumes, creature names and designs, planet designs, and everything in between. It's true that the filmmakers wanted to show what happened before the original trilogy and to expand on the Star Wars galaxy. But the belief that people have about these films is far from the truth. You'll encounter fans who will say that they will only watch the original trilogy because they either grew up with those films and refused to watch anything else, or they were actively denied that the prequels ever happened. And you'll encounter fans who actually do like the prequels. Like me. To the fans who refuse to acknowledge the prequels' existence, let me help you understand something. The prequels are only enhancing the Star Wars universe and story arc, and helping you understand the backstory of Anakin, Obi-Wan, and what happened before the original trilogy. They are not in any way trying to take the original trilogy away from you. you still have the original trilogy to enjoy. Mostly. I'll talk about you later. The prequels not only serve as an expansion and an enhancement of the Star Wars mythos, story arc, and universe, but they also explain how the characters from the original trilogy came to be. You can say that the prequels have flaws and weaknesses, and that's okay, but thinking that they are pointless and horrible is like saying that one of your favorite TV shows is bad because one season or several episodes of a show in a row were duds. It's thinking black and white, and it's not being open to the possibilities of what that movie or show could do. At the end of the day, with the prequels, we now have a complete saga. A saga that is timeless and is more memorable than the Twilight Saga. I'll still watch these films more and more times. I'll watch them over and over and over again. I don't mind at all. I know these films aren't perfect, but I wish people can stop saying that they are outright bad. I know the Phantom Menace disappointed many people, but think of it this way. It is a zillion times better than Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, although I think that movie is just okay. I know Attack of the Clones bored many people, but it's more interesting than the Star Wars Holiday Special. So please, give these another shot. The prequel trilogies serve as expansions to the universe you and I love, and how the characters we love so much began. Nothing more.